My fingers trembled as I adjusted the ivory roses one final time, making sure each petal sat perfectly in the cascading arrangement. Sophie's wedding had to be flawless. She deserved nothing less than perfection. On the day she'd been dreaming about since we were roommates in college, staying up late and planning imaginary futures over cheap wine and pizza. The hotel ballroom in Manhattan gleamed with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden patterns across the white linens and silver place settings. Everything looked like a fairy tale, which made sense, because Sophie had always believed in those. I didn't. Not anymore. Not since the night 8 years ago, when a drunk driver crossed the center line and shattered my world along with my face. My hand moved instinctively toward my right cheek, fingers hovering near the raised scar that ran from temple to jaw. I caught myself and forced my arm down. The gesture had become automatic over the years. A nervous habit I couldn't seem to break, no matter how many times Grace told me to stop drawing attention to it. "Lily, you're going to wear a hole in that bouquet if you keep fussing." Sophie appeared beside me, radiant in her wedding gown. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, tiny diamonds glittering among the curls. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Just making sure everything's perfect for you," I said, managing a smile. My navy bridesmaid dress felt too tight, too formal, too much. I'd already positioned my hair to fall forward on the right side, creating a curtain between my scar and the world. Sophie's expression softened. She reached out and tucked a strand behind my ear, fully exposing the mark I spent so much energy hiding. "You look beautiful. Stop hiding." Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator called for the bridal party to line up. Sophie squeezed my hand once before disappearing in a flurry of white silk and excited chatter. I took my position near the back of the processional line, behind 2 other bridesmaids who were already comparing notes on which groomsmen they found most attractive. Their laughter felt foreign, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. The ceremony began with the traditional processional music. One by one, bridesmaids walked down the aisle on the arms of groomsmen, smiling at the assembled guests. When my turn came, I kept my gaze lowered, focusing on not tripping in heels I rarely wore. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of vows and tears. I stood to the side, holding Sophie's bouquet and trying to remain invisible among the other bridesmaids. But when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, when Elijah kissed Sophie and she laughed with pure joy, something cracked inside my chest. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it, then another. I turned my face away quickly, using the excuse of setting down the bouquet to wipe them away before anyone noticed. Except someone did notice. I felt it like a physical touch, the weight of a gaze on my skin. When I glanced up, I caught sight of a man in the 3rd row, guest side. Dark hair, sharp features, an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He wasn't looking at the happy couple. He was looking directly at me. Our eyes met for a heartbeat before I jerked my attention back to Sophie and Elijah. My pulse hammered in my throat. There'd been something unsettling about his stare, an intensity that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way I couldn't quite explain. The reception that followed was held in an adjacent ballroom, even more elaborate than the ceremony space. A live band played soft jazz as guests mingled with champagne and appetizers. I helped ensure the floral centerpieces were properly arranged on each table, grateful for a task that kept me occupied and away from the dance floor. "You did an amazing job with these," a woman commented, admiring a centerpiece of roses and peonies. "Are you a professional florist?" "Yes, I own a shop in Brooklyn," I replied, allowing myself a moment of pride. Petals and thorns might be small, but it was mine, my mother's legacy, kept alive through my work. "You should give me your card. I'm planning my daughter's sweet 16. I pulled a business card from the small clutch I'd brought, handing it over with a genuine smile. This I could do. Business conversations were safe, transactional, devoid of the personal scrutiny that made my skin crawl. As the evening progressed, I declined 3 separate invitations to dance, eventually retreating to a corner near the gift table. Sophie tried to coax me onto the floor during the bouquet toss, but I shook my head. The single women who actually wanted to catch it should have their chance without me awkwardly standing in the back. The moment came without warning. A groomsman, already drunk despite it being barely 8 in the evening, stumbled past me toward the bar. He paused, squinting at my face with the exaggerated focus of someone several drinks past sober. "What happened to you?" he asked, words slurring together. "Car accident or something?" Heat flooded my cheeks. Several nearby guests turned to look, curiosity and pity mixing in their expressions. The exact attention I'd spent all day trying to avoid. "Excuse me," I managed, moving past him before he could say anything else. My heels clicked rapidly against the marble as I navigated through clusters of guests, searching for an exit that didn't require crossing the main dance floor. I found it, a hallway leading to the hotel's outdoor terrace. The moment I stepped outside, cool evening air hit my flushed skin. June in New York could be unpredictable, but tonight was perfect, clear and mild, with the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over Manhattan. The terrace was empty, mercifully. I walked to the railing overlooking the street below, and finally let myself fall apart. Tears came harder now, angry and ashamed in equal measure. 8 years, and comments like that still had the power to reduce me to this, a 26-year-old woman crying alone at her best friend's wedding, because a drunk stranger pointed out what everyone else was too polite to mention. You know, most people cry at weddings because they're happy. I spun around, nearly losing my balance. The man from the ceremony stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Up close, he was even more striking than I'd realized. Late 30s, maybe, with eyes so blue they seemed almost unnatural in the fading light. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, wiping at my face with the back of my hand. "I didn't realize anyone else was out here." He stepped onto the terrace, moving with a controlled grace that suggested someone comfortable in his own body. "Don't apologize. You have every right to be wherever you want." He pulled a handkerchief from his jacket pocket, offering it to me. "Here." I stared at the fabric, neatly pressed and monogrammed with initials I couldn't quite make out. "I'll ruin it. It's just cloth." He extended it further, waiting until I accepted it before lowering his hand. "I'm Vincent. Lily." I dabbed at my eyes, grateful the handkerchief was dark enough not to show the mascara I was undoubtedly smearing across it. "You're the florist. The bride's friend." It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" A slight smile touched his lips. "I overheard you talking to that woman earlier. And you deliver flowers, correct? I think I saw you at Carmine's a few months back. You were very patient with a server who'd dropped a vase." The memory surfaced. An Italian restaurant in Staten Island. A nervous young waiter apologizing profusely for an accident that wasn't even his fault. I'd reassured him it was fine, helped him clean up the water and salvage what flowers could be saved. You remember that? The fact that he did seemed impossible. I barely remembered it myself. I remember thinking it was refreshing to see someone treat service staff like actual people. Vincent leaned against the railing beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. "So what brings you out here instead of celebrating inside?" I should have made an excuse, claimed I needed air or had a headache. Instead, I found myself answering honestly. "Sometimes being around happy people makes you realize how unhappy you are." He was quiet for a moment, gaze fixed on the city skyline. "That's remarkably honest. You asked." "I did." He turned toward me slightly. "And for what it's worth, I don't think you're as unhappy as you believe." Sad, maybe, but there's a difference. We stood in comfortable silence, the muffled sounds of the reception drifting through the doors behind us. It occurred to me that I should feel uncomfortable, standing on a darkening terrace with a stranger, but I didn't. There was something calming about his presence, a stillness that contrasted sharply with the chaos I usually felt at social gatherings. "What do you do, Vincent?" I asked eventually, curious despite myself. "I work with family businesses, help them navigate complicated situations." Vague, but delivered with the confidence of someone used to being vague. We talked for nearly 20 minutes about inconsequential things. The city, music, the best pizza in New York, an ongoing debate with no clear winner. He didn't ask about my scar, didn't even glance at it with the kind of morbid curiosity I'd grown accustomed to. When Sophie's voice called my name from inside, searching for me, I realized how long I'd been gone. "I should get back," I said reluctantly. Vincent nodded, straightening from the railing. "It was good to meet you, Lily." "You too." I handed back his handkerchief. "Keep it. Something tells me weddings aren't your favorite events." A laugh escaped before I could stop it, surprising us both. When was the last time I'd laughed genuinely at something other than Grace's terrible jokes? I returned to the reception, hyper-aware of Sophie's questioning look, but unable to explain what had just happened. As the night wound down and guests began departing, I found myself scanning the crowd one final time. Vincent stood near the exit, talking quietly with another man. As if sensing my attention, he looked up. Our eyes met across the ballroom. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just held my gaze for 3 seconds before turning back to his conversation. I had no idea who he really was. No idea that in 2 days, he would walk into my flower shop and change everything. Monday morning arrived with the familiar scent of soil and stems, the quiet rhythm of my world reasserting itself after the chaos of Sophie's wedding. I stood behind the counter of petals and thorns, trimming the ends off a fresh delivery of tulips while mentally calculating how many arrangements I could create for the corporate order due Wednesday. The shop wasn't much, just a narrow space wedged between a bakery and a vintage clothing store in Carroll Gardens. But the morning light came through the front windows at the perfect angle, illuminating the buckets of flowers in shades of pink, yellow, and white. My mother had chosen this location 15 years ago, back when the neighborhood was less trendy and rent was actually affordable. I missed her most in these quiet morning hours, when I went through the same routines she'd taught me. How to cut stems at an angle for better water absorption, which flowers lasted longest in arrangements, the importance of removing leaves below the waterline to prevent bacterial growth. The bell above the door chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked up, already forming a greeting, and froze. Vincent stood in the doorway, somehow looking both perfectly at ease and completely out of place among the flowers. His suit today was charcoal gray, tailored to precision, probably worth more than everything in my shop combined. "Lily," he said, as if we'd planned this meeting, as if his presence here was the most natural thing in the world. "Vincent." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What are you doing here?" "I need flowers." He approached the counter, glancing around at the various displays with what seemed like genuine interest. For a special occasion. Something about the way he said it made me suspicious, but I fell into professional mode easily enough. This I knew how to do. What kind of occasion? That'll help me narrow down what might work best. A centerpiece for a dinner I'm hosting this weekend. He met my eyes, and I noticed again how unsettlingly blue his were. Something elegant but not ostentatious. "What would you suggest?" I walked him through several options, showing him combinations of roses with eucalyptus, peonies with ranunculus, orchids with ferns. He asked intelligent questions about longevity and care, seeming genuinely invested in the decision. The orchids, he decided finally. White with the dark foliage. "How much?" I quoted him a price that included delivery to Staten Island, since he mentioned that's where the dinner would be held. He didn't flinch, just pulled out a wallet and handed me his card. "Vincent Castellano," the card read. No business name, just a phone number with a New York area code. "I'll have them delivered Friday afternoon," I said, processing the payment. "Any specific time? Whenever works for you." He pocketed his wallet, but made no move to leave. "How long have you had this shop?" 3 years as the owner. But it was my mother's before that. She started it when I was 11, and she taught you the trade. Everything I know. The familiar ache settled in my chest whenever I talked about her. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. His expression shifted. Something like understanding crossing his features. "I'm sorry." Losing a parent is never easy, regardless of age. The comment was simple, but something in his tone suggested personal experience. Before I could ask, the bell chimed again. Grace burst through the door with all the energy of a 19-year-old who'd just finished her Monday morning class at NYU. My sister had inherited our mother's red hair and optimistic disposition, both of which I'd somehow missed in the genetic lottery. "Lily, do you have any cash? I forgot my Metro card at home and—" She stopped short, noticing Vincent. Her eyes widened slightly, that quick assessment she did whenever she encountered someone new. "Oh, sorry." Didn't realize you had a customer. It's fine. This is Vincent. Vincent, my sister Grace. Pleasure, Vincent said, offering a polite nod. I was just leaving. Lily, I'll see you Friday for the delivery. He left before I could respond, the bell chiming behind him. Grace immediately spun toward me, lowering her voice even though we were alone. Who was that? And why does he look like he walked out of a movie about expensive lawyers or mob bosses? I laughed despite myself. He's just a customer who wants flowers for a dinner party. Right. Because normal dinner party customers look at you the way he just did. Grace accepted the $20 bill I pulled from the register. I'm just saying, be careful. Rich guys don't usually hang around flower shops in Brooklyn unless they want something. Her words stayed with me after she left. Vincent did return, twice more that week. Wednesday, he came in claiming he needed a small arrangement for his office. Friday, he appeared just as I was closing, saying he wanted to personally ensure the orchids he'd ordered had been properly arranged before delivery. Each visit felt deliberate, calculated. But there was also something genuine in the way he asked about my day, remembered details I'd mentioned in passing, treated me like someone worth his attention. By Friday evening, as I locked up the shop after his latest visit, my curiosity had transformed into something dangerously close to interest. I found myself wondering about him during the quiet moments, replaying conversations and searching for meanings I wasn't sure existed. Saturday morning, Grace showed up at my apartment looking grim. We need to talk about your customer, she said, shoving her phone in my face before I'd even finished my coffee. The screen displayed a news article from 2 years ago. Vincent Castellano's name appeared in bold, connected to allegations of organized crime activity. Another article detailed the Castellano family's supposed involvement in various businesses throughout New York, some legal, others existing in gray areas the law couldn't quite penetrate. He's not just some rich guy, Lily. He's connected, like seriously connected. Grace scrolled through more results, each painting a picture of a man far more complicated than the polite customer who'd been visiting my shop. I'm not saying he's dangerous necessarily, but you should know what you're dealing with. I read through the articles slowly, my stomach tightening with each paragraph. The Vincent described here, allegations of illegal gambling operations, loan sharking, protection rackets, seemed impossible to reconcile with the man who'd asked thoughtful questions about flower arrangements, but I couldn't deny the evidence. Vincent Castellano was exactly what Grace's first impression had suggested. Someone from a world I knew nothing about. Thanks for telling me, I said quietly, handing back her phone. So you'll stay away from him? I didn't answer. Couldn't really, because I wasn't sure what I intended to do with this information. Part of me knew the smart thing would be to keep interactions purely professional, maintain boundaries between my simple life and whatever complicated existence Vincent inhabited. But another part of me, the part that had felt truly seen for the first time in years on that hotel terrace, wanted to know more. Monday arrived with a decision crystallizing in my mind. If Vincent came back, I would confront him directly. Ask him what he really wanted, why he kept appearing in my shop. I deserved honesty, at minimum. The day passed slowly. I helped customers, worked on arrangements, checked my phone more times than I'd admit. By 5 o'clock, I'd convinced myself he wouldn't come, that maybe Grace's discovery and my subsequent cold distance over the weekend had somehow telepathically communicated itself to him. Then, at 5:45, just as I was preparing to close, I made a choice. I looked up the address for Luciano's, a restaurant I'd seen mentioned in one of the articles as a known Castellano establishment. It was in Staten Island, which explained Vincent's request for delivery there. If I wanted answers, I'd have to go get them myself. The Uber ride took nearly 50 minutes in evening traffic. I had plenty of time to second-guess the decision, to tell the driver to turn around. But I didn't. Instead, I watched the city transform from brownstones and small shops to broader streets, and eventually, the neighborhoods of Staten Island. Luciano's occupied a corner building with warm lighting spilling from its windows. Classical Italian architecture, the kind that suggested old money and older traditions. I paid the driver and approached the entrance with more confidence than I felt. I need to see Vincent Castellano, I told the host, A man in his 50s with sharp eyes that assessed me in seconds. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell him Lily Morgan is here. He'll want to know." The host disappeared through a doorway behind the bar. I stood in the entrance, hyper-aware of the curious glances from diners and staff. This was a mistake. I should leave. Before I could act on the thought, the host returned. "Follow me." He led me through the restaurant, past tables of people eating and talking, through a door marked private, down a hallway with artwork that looked genuinely expensive, and finally to an office at the end. Vincent sat behind a mahogany desk, surprise clear on his face when I entered. He stood immediately. "Lily, I wasn't expecting you." "I know." I stayed near the door, suddenly unsure. "I needed to talk to you." He dismissed the host with a subtle nod, waiting until we were alone before speaking. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "I know who you are," I said, forcing the words out. "Vincent Castellano, the Castellano family. I know what people say about you, about your business." His expression shifted, guarded now. "And what do they say? That you're involved in organized crime. That your family controls half the illegal operations in this city." I crossed my arms, defensive. "So I'm asking you directly. Why have you been coming to my flower shop? What do you really want?" Silence stretched between us. Vincent walked around the desk, leaning against it rather than approaching me. Giving me space, I realized. "You want honesty?" he asked quietly. "Yes, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that terrace." His voice was steady, matter of fact. "Before that, actually. Since I saw you at Carmine's treating that server with kindness he didn't receive from anyone else that day. And the flowers, yes, they were pretexts. Excuses to see you again, to talk to you. Why?" The question emerged smaller than I intended. "Because you're real, Lily. In a world where everyone wants something from me, where every interaction is calculated and political, you just existed, cried when you were sad, smiled when something genuinely pleased you." He paused. "I won't lie to you about what I am. My family's business operates in areas the law doesn't approve of. But I can keep you separate from that world, protected from it. I don't need protection. I need to understand what I'm dealing with if I'm going to keep seeing you." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. "Are you going to keep seeing me?" I should have said no. Should have walked out and returned to my simple, safe life making flower arrangements and avoiding complications. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I want to, which probably makes me crazy. Or brave." Vincent straightened, but still didn't approach. "If you decide you want to try this, to see where it goes, I can promise you 3 things. I'll never lie to you. I'll never put you in danger intentionally. And I'll never ask you to compromise who you are. That's a lot of promises from someone whose world I don't understand. Then let me help you understand. Have dinner with me. Ask me anything you want. No pretenses, no flower arrangements as excuses." I looked at him. Really looked, trying to see past the expensive suit and the confident bearing to whatever truth existed underneath. What I found was complicated, certainly, but also genuine in a way I hadn't expected. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Dinner, but somewhere public. Not here." A slight smile touched his lips. "Anywhere you want." We arranged details. A restaurant in Brooklyn that I chose specifically because it was on my territory. As I left Luciano's and climbed into another Uber for the long ride home, I realized my hands were shaking. Grace was going to kill me for this. 10 days passed since my impulsive visit to Luciano's. 10 days of exchanged text messages. One dinner that stretched past midnight as we talked about everything and nothing. And a growing awareness that I was stepping into something I couldn't fully comprehend. Vincent kept his distance physically, respecting boundaries I hadn't explicitly stated but that he seemed to intuit anyway. It made me trust him more, which probably should have worried me but didn't. Tonight, I was closing the shop later than usual. A last-minute order for a corporate event had kept me working past 10, arranging 24 centerpieces that needed to be delivered first thing tomorrow morning. My back ached from bending over the work table, and my fingers smelled perpetually of roses and greenery. I locked the front door, tested it twice out of habit, and started the 3-block walk to the subway station. Carroll Gardens felt safe enough at this hour, familiar streets I'd walked countless times. But something felt different tonight, an awareness prickling at the back of my neck. A man had come into the shop twice this past week. Mid-40s, unremarkable features, asking vague questions about wholesale suppliers and whether I provided flowers for events in Staten Island. I'd thought he was a potential business contact, maybe someone looking to start his own shop. Now, walking alone in the dark, those questions took on a more sinister quality. I picked up my pace, heels clicking against concrete. Almost there. 2 more blocks. Miss Morgan. The voice came from behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, to find 2 men blocking the sidewalk I'd just traversed. Neither was the man from the shop, but something about their stance screamed danger. "I don't have much cash," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe $40. You can have it." The taller one smiled, and it was worse than if he'd threatened me outright. "We don't want your money, but you've been spending time with some dangerous people. That makes you valuable." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Vincent Castellano." The second man moved closer, cutting off my escape route toward the subway. "You're his new little project, which means someone would pay well to get their hands on you." Terror turned my blood to ice. I opened my mouth to scream, but the tall one lunged forward, clamping a hand over my face. I bit down hard, tasting blood, and he swore viciously. His partner grabbed my arm, yanking me toward a dark sedan parked at the curb. I fought, kicking and twisting, but he was so much stronger. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in my neighborhood where I'd always felt safe. "Let her go." The new voice was calm, almost casual, but both men froze. I was released so suddenly I stumbled, catching myself against a parked car. A man I'd never seen before stood 10 feet away, hands in his pockets like he was out for an evening stroll. He was shorter than my attackers, maybe 30 years old, with an expression that suggested he'd seen worse things than this and found them boring. "Tony Russo," the tall attacker said, recognition and fear mixing in his voice. "This isn't Castellano business." "Funny, because it looks like you're trying to kidnap someone under Castellano protection." Tony, if that was his name, still hadn't moved, which makes it very much my business. "Salvatore will hear about this. I'm counting on it." Tony finally moved, a fluid motion that put him between me and the attackers. Another man appeared from somewhere, equally calm, equally dangerous in a way I couldn't quite define. "Now walk away before this gets unpleasant." The attackers exchanged glances. For a moment I thought they might try anyway, might escalate this into violence. Then the tall one spat on the ground and backed toward the sedan. "Salvatore's going to get her eventually," he said. "Tell Castellano that." They drove off, tires squealing. I stood frozen against the car, adrenaline making my hands shake uncontrollably. Tony turned toward me, his expression gentler now. "You're okay. They won't come back tonight." He pulled out a phone, dialing without waiting for my response. "Boss, we have a situation. I'm with Lily Morgan in Carroll Gardens. Someone just tried to grab her." I couldn't hear Vincent's response, but Tony's next words sent a chill through me. "Yeah, they mentioned Salvatore. Said he's going to get her eventually." Tony ended the call and gestured to a black car I hadn't noticed parked nearby. "Vincent wants me to bring you somewhere safe. He's on his way. I don't understand what's happening." My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Who's Salvatore? Why did they try to take me?" "Let's get you off the street first. I'll explain in the car." Tony's tone was patient, the kind you'd use with someone in shock. "I know you're scared, but I promise Vincent will make sure you're protected. I should have refused. Should have called the police, handled this through official channels, but the fear clouding my judgment made me nod. Let Tony guide me into the car where another man sat in the driver's seat. We drove for 15 minutes, ending up in Brooklyn Heights at a nondescript building. Tony led me up to a 3rd-floor apartment that looked like a hotel room. Generic and impersonal, but clean. "This is a safe house," he explained. "No one knows about it except a handful of people. Vincent will be here soon." "How did you find me?" The question emerged belatedly, through the fog of adrenaline crash. "I was having dinner 2 blocks over. Heard someone scream, went to check. Tony paused. Lucky timing. For you, anyway. Lucky. I sat on the couch, still shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had tried to kidnap me because of Vincent. Because I'd made the monumentally stupid decision to get involved with a man whose life included enemies willing to use me as leverage. The apartment door opened 20 minutes later. Vincent entered like a storm barely contained, his usual composure fractured by something raw. He crossed to me in 3 strides, crouching in front of the couch so we were eye level. Are you hurt? His hands hovered near my face, not quite touching, waiting for permission. No. Tony got there before they could do anything serious. I met his gaze, anger starting to burn through the fear. What the hell is going on, Vincent? Who's Salvatore? Vincent sat back on his heels, jaw tight. Lorenzo Salvatore runs a rival organization. We've had an uneasy peace for years, but he's been looking for leverage to force a territorial negotiation in his favor. And I'm leverage because you've been visiting my flower shop. The absurdity would have been funny if I weren't so terrified. Salvatore has people watching my movements. When I started spending time at your shop, he noticed. Decided you could be useful. Vincent's expression darkened. I should have anticipated this. Should have been more careful. So what? You just disappear from my life and he leaves me alone? It doesn't work that way anymore. He's already identified you as someone I care about. Backing off now won't make you safer. It'll just leave you unprotected. I stood, needing distance, needing to move. This is insane. I sell flowers, Vincent. I make arrangements for weddings and corporate events. I don't belong in a world where people get kidnapped over territory disputes. I know. He stood too, maintaining space between us, which is why I'm offering you protection. You and Grace. Full security until I can resolve this with Salvatore. Resolve how? Through negotiation. He wants control of the Southern Territory border, an area we've held for a decade. I'll give it to him in exchange for guaranteed peace and assurance that you and your sister are untouchable. I stared at him. You'd give up territory for me? We've known each other less than 3 weeks. Yes. No hesitation, no doubt. Because the alternative is leaving you vulnerable to a man who wouldn't hesitate to hurt you to get what he wants. The weight of that settled over me. Vincent was willing to make major concessions in his world, whatever that meant politically, to keep me safe from a danger I'd only entered because of him. What about Grace? She doesn't even know about us, not really. Tony already has someone picking her up from her dorm. She'll stay with you at your apartment, with security outside. Salvatore won't touch either of you once he knows I'm willing to negotiate seriously. And I just accept this? Accept having my entire life disrupted because you decided to buy flowers from me? Vincent's expression tightened, pain flickering across his features. No, you can refuse. Walk away. Tell me you never want to see me again. But please, let me keep the security on you until this is resolved. After that, you make whatever choice you want about whether I'm in your life. I wanted to scream at him, to rage about the unfairness of being dragged into something I hadn't chosen. But beneath the anger was bone-deep fear. The memory of those men's hands on me. The certainty that without Tony's intervention, I'd be somewhere much worse right now. I need to see Grace. Make sure she's okay. Tony will take you both home. The security team will be discreet but present. Vincent moved toward the door, then paused. I'm sorry, Lily. I never wanted this for you. But this is your world. The statement held no judgment, just tired acceptance. This is what knowing you means. He nodded once, a sharp movement that spoke to his own frustration. Yes. Tony drove us to my apartment, where Grace was waiting with another security guard. My sister threw her arms around me the moment I walked in, questions tumbling out faster than I could answer. I told her everything. About Vincent. About what had happened tonight. About the choice I'd made to let him protect us. Grace listened, her face cycling through shock, fear, and finally a pragmatic acceptance that reminded me she was tougher than I gave her credit for. So, we have bodyguards now, she said when I finished. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. Just for a few weeks. Vincent's negotiating with Salvatore. And then what? You go back to dating the mob boss like this is normal? I didn't have an answer for that. didn't know if I wanted to continue something with Vincent after this, or if tonight had shown me exactly why involving myself with him was a terrible idea. That night I lay awake listening to Grace's breathing from the other room, feeling the presence of armed men outside my door. Somewhere in Staten Island, Vincent was probably doing the same, planning moves in a game I'd never wanted to play. My phone buzzed with a text. Vincent, security will stay until this is resolved. When it is, you decide if you want to see me again. No pressure. You deserve that choice. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Okay, one word, carrying the weight of everything I couldn't yet articulate. Fear, anger, and underneath it all, a stubborn thread of something I refused to call hope. 6 weeks transformed my life in ways I never anticipated. The constant presence of security became normal, almost comfortable. Tony checked in daily, his dry humor making the situation feel less oppressive. The shop actually thrived with the subtle protection, regulars commenting that the neighborhood felt safer somehow. Vincent kept his promise about distance. No visits, just occasional text messages asking how I was doing, never pushing for more. The space should have brought relief. But instead, I found myself missing him, missing our conversations. The way he listened like my words actually mattered. The intensity of his attention that had initially unnerved me. Grace adjusted faster than I did. She even befriended one of the security guards, a former Marine who helped her study for her criminal justice exam, with real-world insights her textbook couldn't provide. My sister had always been adaptable, but watching her navigate this bizarre situation with ease made me feel oddly proud. Today, Tony appeared at the shop during my afternoon lull, his expression lighter than usual. Good news. Salvatore accepted the final terms this morning. Official peace agreement, witnessed by neutral families. You and Grace are explicitly protected in the accord. He leaned against the counter. Which means you're safe. The security detail ends tonight unless you request otherwise. Relief should have flooded through me. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. Vincent got what he wanted then. He gave up significant territory to ensure your safety. But yes, the threat is over. Tony studied my face with an insight that made me uncomfortable. He told me to let you know there's no obligation. You don't owe him anything. But if you wanted to see him, he'd be open to that. I busied myself arranging daisies that didn't need arranging. Tell him I'll think about it. Tony left with a knowing smile that suggested he saw right through my deflection. I closed the shop early, needing time to think, to process what came next, now that the immediate danger had passed. At home, I found Grace sprawled on the couch with her textbooks. She looked up when I entered, immediately reading my expression. Tony told you. Yeah. I dropped onto the couch beside her. It's over. We're safe. So why do you look miserable instead of relieved? I'm not miserable. Lily, you've been checking your phone every 10 minutes for 6 weeks, hoping Vincent would text. You miss him. I couldn't deny it. Is that completely insane? Missing someone whose world nearly got me kidnapped? Grace closed her textbook, turning to face me fully. Here's what I know. Vincent gave up something important to keep you safe. He respected your space when you needed it, and you've been the happiest I've seen you in years when you talk about him. At least before the Salvatore thing. She paused. Life doesn't come with guarantees, Lily. You can play it safe forever, or you can take a risk on something that might actually make you happy. Her words echoed in my mind long after she returned to studying. That night, I stared at my phone for an hour before finally typing a message to Vincent. I'd like to talk. Can I come see you? His response came within seconds. Anytime. I'll send Tony to drive you if you want. I can Uber. Let me do this one thing, please. I agreed, and 30 minutes later, Tony arrived to drive me to Staten Island. The 45-minute journey felt longer, anticipation and nervousness tangling in my stomach. We'd been apart for 6 weeks, communication minimal. What if the connection I remembered had been illusory, born from heightened circumstances? The mansion appeared through the trees, larger than I'd imagined. Classical architecture with modern updates, sprawling grounds that spoke of wealth accumulated over generations. Tony parked near the entrance where Vincent waited. He looked different somehow. Still impeccably dressed, but there was a weariness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. When he saw me exit the car, Relief washed over his features so completely. It made my chest ache. Lily, my name on his lips felt like coming home. Thank you for coming. Thank you for respecting my space. I followed him inside, taking in the marble floors. Artwork that probably cost more than my shop's annual revenue. The quiet elegance of old money. This is where you live? It was my father's house. His father's before that. Vincent led me through to a sitting room that felt less formal, with comfortable furniture and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Can I get you something? Wine, coffee, water? I'm okay. I settled onto a couch, and he took a chair across from me, maintaining distance. Tony said the agreement is finalized. That we're safe. Yes. Salvatore got the Southern Territory. I got assurance that you and Grace are untouchable. Neutral families witnessed the accord, so he's bound by it. Vincent leaned forward, forearms on his knees. I'm sorry it took 6 weeks. These negotiations move slowly. You gave up territory for me. For someone you barely know. I know you well enough. His blue eyes held mine. Well enough to know that losing you would be worse than losing any piece of land. Silence stretched between us, heavy with words neither of us quite knew how to say. Finally I spoke. I missed you. Which probably makes me an idiot, but it's true. Something shifted in his expression, hope breaking through the careful composure. I missed you too. Every day. But I meant what I said about no pressure, no obligation. I know you did. I stood, needing to move, to think. My attention caught on a grand piano in the corner. Do you play? My grandmother insisted I learn. Said music kept the soul human. Vincent rose, approaching the piano. She was Italian, very traditional, believed that men in our world needed something beautiful to balance the darkness. He sat at the bench, fingers finding keys like old friends. The melody that emerged was haunting. Something classical I didn't recognize, but that spoke of longing and loss. I watched his hands move, remembered those same hands offering me a handkerchief on a hotel terrace weeks ago. When the music faded, Vincent looked up at me. Would you like to stay for dinner? I could cook. Nothing fancy. Just pasta like my grandmother taught me. The offer surprised me. Vincent Castellano, who commanded organizations and negotiated territorial disputes, offering to cook pasta in his mansion. The juxtaposition was absurd and somehow perfect. I'd like that. We moved to the kitchen, a massive space with professional-grade appliances and the kind of functionality that suggested someone actually used it. Vincent gathered ingredients while I perched on a stool at the island, watching him work. Tell me about your grandmother, I said, accepting the glass of wine he poured. He smiled, something soft and genuine. Rosa Castellano. 4 feet 11 inches of pure determination. She came from Sicily at 16, married my grandfather in an arranged match, and proceeded to run the family with more authority than any man could claim. As he chopped garlic and tomatoes, he shared stories. How Rosa had insisted on family dinners every Sunday, no matter what business was happening. How she'd boxed Vincent's ears at 19 when she caught him neglecting his studies for street business. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. Vincent's hands stilled. I was with her at the end. She told me to find someone who saw me, not just the name. Said power was empty without love to give it meaning. She sounds remarkable. She was. He resumed cooking, the kitchen filling with the scent of garlic and herbs. What about your mother? You've mentioned her, but only in passing. The question unlocked something in me. I told him about my mother's flower shop, how she'd built it from nothing, about the accident, how I'd been driving us home from a late event, how the drunk driver had hit us head-on, how I'd woken up in the hospital with a shattered cheekbone and the news that my mother hadn't survived. I blamed myself for years. Still do sometimes. If I'd taken a different route, if I'd seen him coming, if I'd reacted faster. Vincent set down his wooden spoon, circling the island to stand near me. May I say something that might be difficult to hear? I nodded, not trusting my voice. You survived something that would have destroyed most people. You took that pain, that loss, and you kept your mother's legacy alive through the shop. You raised your sister while grieving yourself. He paused. That's not weakness or failure, Lily. That's extraordinary strength. Tears I'd been holding back spilled over. Vincent didn't try to stop them, didn't tell me not to cry. He simply waited, present and steady, until I'd cried myself out. "I'm sorry," I managed eventually. "I don't usually fall apart like this." "Don't apologize for feeling things." Vincent retrieved tissues, handing them to me. "In my world, showing emotion is considered weakness. I've spent years maintaining control, never letting anyone see beneath the surface. But you make me want to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable." He returned to the stove, finishing the pasta while I composed myself. We ate at his kitchen table, the conversation flowing easier now that we'd both exposed vulnerable parts of ourselves. He asked about my plans for the shop, listened intently as I described wanting to expand to event planning. I asked about his family, learning about cousins and uncles who comprised the organization's structure. After dinner, Vincent gave me a tour ending at a terrace overlooking the grounds. The ocean was visible in the distance, a dark line against the city lights of Staten Island and Manhattan beyond. "This is beautiful," I said, taking in the view. "It's lonely." Vincent stood beside me at the railing. "This house, the power. All of it feels empty most of the time. Until recently." "What changed recently?" He turned toward me, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. "I met someone who cried at a wedding and didn't care who saw. Who makes flower arrangements with the kind of care most people reserve for precious things. Who survived tragedy and chose to keep growing instead of closing off. Vincent." His name emerged as barely a whisper. "I know we're from different worlds. I know my life is complicated and dangerous, and nothing like what you deserve." He lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to move away. When I didn't, his fingers traced the line of my scar with heartbreaking gentleness. "But I've never wanted anything the way I want to be part of your life. However, you'll have me." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I'm scared. Of your world, of getting hurt, of caring too much about someone I can't fully understand. Those are valid fears." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. "I'm scared too, of disappointing you, of the darkness in my life touching yours. But I'd rather be scared together than safe and alone." The space between us disappeared as I leaned forward. Vincent met me halfway, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was everything the moment called for. Tender, searching, layered with weeks of longing and the relief of finally letting walls fall. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against his, breathing hard. "So we're doing this," I said, "despite everything." "Only if you want to. Only at your pace." Vincent's hands cupped my face carefully, like I was something precious. "But yes, if you'll have me, I'm absolutely doing this." I kissed him again, answering without words. Whatever came next, whatever complications his world brought, we'd face them together. It wasn't a guarantee of easy, but it was honest. And after years of hiding from everything that mattered, honesty felt like the bravest choice I could make. Tony drove me home near midnight, Vincent's reluctance to let me go evident in the way he'd held my hand until the last possible moment. Grace took one look at my face and grinned. "You're in deep, aren't you?" "Completely." I couldn't stop smiling. "Absolutely. Terrifyingly in deep." "Good. You deserve to be happy, Lily. Even if it's complicated." I thought about Vincent's hands on my face, the vulnerability in his eyes, the promise of something real despite all the obstacles. Grace was right. Complicated didn't mean wrong. Sometimes it just meant worth fighting for. 3 months felt simultaneously like forever, and no time at all. Vincent and I settled into a rhythm that worked for us. Dinner twice a week, occasional visits to the shop, stolen afternoons when his schedule allowed. He kept his promise about separating me from the darker aspects of his work, never discussing details I didn't need to know. Grace surprised me by warming to him completely. He'd shown up at our apartment one evening with textbooks on criminal law, mentioned casually that he knew professors at NYU who could offer insights into her field of study. Never condescending, always respectful of her intelligence. She'd melted after that, declaring him surprisingly decent for a crime boss. I kept the relationship relatively private. Friends knew I was seeing someone, but I avoided specifics. Sophie knew I was happy, and that seemed enough for her as she navigated the early months of married life. Until today. My phone rang while I was pricing out flowers for a retirement party. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. and something about the third call in an hour made me answer, despite being busy. "Lily, I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" Her voice sounded strained. "Wrong. What's going on? Are you okay? Just meet me at the cafe near your shop. Please, it's important." 20 minutes later, I slid into the booth across from her. Sophie looked terrible, eyes red-rimmed, hands wrapped around a coffee mug like she needed the warmth. This wasn't about wedding planning or sharing happy newlywed stories. "What happened?" I asked gently. "I know who you're dating." She looked up, and I saw fear mixed with accusation. "Vincent Castellano. I saw photos on social media. Someone tagged you at a restaurant in Staten Island with him. So I looked him up, Lily. Do you have any idea what you're involved with?" My stomach tightened. "Sophie. He's a mobster. His family runs illegal gambling, loan operations. Probably worse things the articles won't say outright." Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself, lowering it to an urgent whisper. "You can't seriously be with him. It's more complicated than that." "How is it complicated?" "He's dangerous. His entire world is dangerous. You need to end this before you get hurt." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I can't lose my best friend to this, Lily." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "I understand you're scared, but Vincent isn't what you think. Or at least he's not only that." "Then explain it to me." Sophie pulled her hand back. "Make me understand how this makes sense." I couldn't. Not really. How could I explain the way Vincent saw past my scars? The tenderness beneath his controlled exterior? The feeling of being truly known for the first time in my life? None of it would sound rational to someone viewing it from the outside. "I love him," I said instead. The words emerged with certainty I hadn't consciously acknowledged until now. I know that probably sounds crazy, but it's true. Sophie's face crumpled. "Lily, please listen. There's more. Elijah's in trouble." Everything in me went cold. "What kind of trouble?" "He owes money. $50,000 to a gambling operation." She was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. "Men came to our apartment last week demanding payment. I didn't know about any of it until then. Elijah had been hiding it for months." 50,000? The number was staggering. How did he even accumulate that much? Underground poker games? Sports betting? I don't even know all of it. Sophie's hands shook. "The men who came, they said he has 2 weeks to pay or there will be consequences." And then I started digging, trying to figure out who he owed. "Lily, it's the Castellano organization." The world tilted. "You're sure?" "One of the collectors. I recognized him from photos of people associated with Vincent. Tony Russo." She looked at me desperately. "You have influence now. You could ask Vincent to forgive the debt. He'd do it for you, wouldn't he?" The request hit me like a physical blow. She wanted me to use my relationship to erase her husband's poor choices, to ask Vincent for a favor that would cost him $50,000 and potentially his credibility. "Sophie, I can't just ask him to forgive that kind of money. You won't even try?" Her voice turned sharp. "This is my marriage, Lily. If Elijah can't pay, they'll hurt him. Maybe worse. And you're sleeping with the man who could stop it with one word. That's not fair. None of this is fair." Sophie stood abruptly, drawing stares from other patrons. "I'm your best friend. I was there when your mother died, when you couldn't look at yourself in a mirror because of your scar. I held you through all of it. And now, when I need you, when I'm begging you for help, you won't even ask." Guilt and anger warred inside me. She was right that she'd been there during my darkest times, but she was also asking me to compromise my relationship, to treat Vincent like a tool I could use to solve problems. "I'll talk to him," I heard myself say. "I can't promise anything, but I'll talk to him." Sophie's relief was palpable. She hugged me tightly, whispering thank you over and over. I left the cafe feeling sick, the weight of her expectations pressing down on my shoulders. That evening, I drove to Staten Island without calling ahead. Vincent's surprise was evident when I showed up at his door, but he welcomed me in immediately. "What's wrong?" He'd gotten good at reading my moods, knowing when something beneath the surface was churning. I told him everything. About Sophie's discovery, about Elijah's debt, about her desperate request. Vincent listened without interrupting, his expression growing more shuttered with each word. When I finished, Silence filled his study. He stood at the window overlooking the grounds, back rigid. "You want me to forgive the debt," he said finally. "I want to understand why you can't." The distinction mattered. "Sophie thinks I have influence, that you do this for me. But I know it's more complicated." Vincent turned, and I saw frustration etched into every line of his face. If I forgive a $50,000 debt without justification, I show weakness. Others will expect the same treatment. My authority gets questioned, challenged. In my world, that kind of perceived vulnerability invites problems that can get people killed. It's just money, though. You have money. It's never just money. He crossed to me, hands flexing like he wanted to reach out but was restraining himself. It's about rules and structure. Without those, everything collapses into chaos. So Elijah just suffers because he made a mistake? Because your rules matter more than compassion? The words came out harsher than I intended. Vincent's jaw tightened, hurt flashing across his face before anger replaced it. "You think I like these rules? You think I wouldn't prefer to live in a world where I could show mercy without it being exploited?" His voice rose, frustration finally breaking through his usual control. "I don't get that luxury, Lily. Every decision I make has ripple effects you don't see because I've kept you separate from that reality. Maybe that's the problem," I shot back. "Maybe you've kept me so separate that I can't understand why you won't help my best friend when you clearly have the power to do it. Because showing that kind of favoritism makes me look weak and compromised. Do you know what happens when a leader appears weak in my world? People die. Territories get invaded. Violence erupts." We stared at each other, the first real fight crackling between us like lightning. I wanted to understand his position. Truly did. But all I could see was Sophie's terrified face. Hear her pleading for help I might be able to provide. "So there's nothing you can do," I said flatly. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his agitation. Then he exhaled slowly, visibly pulling himself back under control. I didn't say that. He moved to his desk, pulling out a notepad. "I can restructure the debt. No interest, extended payment plan over 3 years instead of the usual terms. And I can offer Elijah a job at one of my legitimate businesses, something that pays well enough that the monthly payments are manageable. Not forgiveness. No, not forgiveness. But significant leniency that respects both your request and the rules I have to operate within." He set down the pen, meeting my eyes. "It's the best I can offer without undermining everything I've built." I should have been grateful. He was trying to find middle ground, to balance my needs against the constraints of his position. But Sophie's words echoed in my head, the accusation that I wouldn't even try. And his compromise felt insufficient. Will that be enough for Sophie? I don't know, I admitted. But it's what I can ask for, apparently. Vincent's expression tightened. "You're angry with me." "I'm angry at the situation. At the fact that your world has rules that contradict basic human decency. And I'm frustrated that you're judging those rules without understanding the context that created them." His voice was quiet now, dangerously so. "Do you think I enjoy being the person who can't simply help when asked? That I like having to calculate political ramifications of every act of kindness?" The pain beneath his words stopped me short. I'd been so focused on Sophie's crisis that I hadn't considered what this position cost Vincent. The constant weight of decisions that affected dozens of lives. "I'm sorry," I said, the fight draining out of me. "You're right. I'm asking you to compromise your world for mine without really understanding what that means. And I'm sorry I can't be the person who simply fixes this for you." Vincent closed the distance between us, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "But I'm trying, Lily. I'm trying to find solutions that work for both of us." We stood like that for a long moment, the anger dissipating into something more complicated. Understanding mixed with frustration, love tangled with the recognition that our different worlds created fundamental conflicts neither of us knew how to fully resolve. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "I'll have Tony contact Elijah tomorrow with the restructured terms. Your friend's husband can pay off his debt without destroying his life." Vincent's thumb traced circles on my shoulder. "And you decide if you can accept that I'll always have these limitations, these rules I can't break even when I want to." The unspoken question hung between us. Could I build a life with someone whose moral framework operated by different principles than mine? Could he be with someone who would always struggle to accept those principles? I don't know, I whispered honestly. I want to, but I don't know if I can keep having this conversation every time your world collides with mine. That's fair. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, and it felt like goodbye. Take the time you need to figure that out. I'll be here when you have an answer. Tony drove me home in silence. I stared out the window at the city lights blurring past, feeling the weight of an impossible choice settling onto my shoulders. Love Vincent and accept the complications, or walk away and return to a simpler life that suddenly felt unbearably empty. Grace was still awake when I got home. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. What happened? I told her everything. About Sophie, Elijah, the fight with Vincent. She listened with the patience of someone who'd become far wiser than her 19 years. So he's trying to help within his constraints. And you're upset it's not enough, Grace summarized. But Lily, is anything ever going to be enough when you're measuring him against an impossible standard? What do you mean? You want him to be both the man who operates in his world successfully and the man who can ignore that world's rules whenever it's inconvenient. That's not realistic. She squeezed my hand. Nobody's perfect. The question is whether his imperfections are ones you can live with. I spent the next week avoiding both Sophie and Vincent, needing space to think. Sophie called twice, but I didn't answer. Vincent texted once to confirm that Elijah had accepted the restructured terms, then went silent, respecting the distance I'd asked for. In the quiet of my flower shop, surrounded by blooms and greenery, I finally let myself acknowledge the truth. I loved Vincent, complications and all, but love didn't automatically erase the fundamental challenge of our different worlds. The question wasn't whether I loved him. It was whether I was strong enough to build a life that bridged those worlds without losing myself in the process. 8 days of silence felt like drowning in slow motion. The flower shop became my refuge, a place where I could focus on tangible things like stem lengths and color combinations instead of the mess I'd made of my personal life. Customers came and went, oblivious to the storm churning beneath my professional smile. Grace didn't push, but her pointed look spoke volumes. She'd mentioned casually that happiness didn't come with guarantees, that waiting for perfect meant waiting forever. I knew she was right, but acknowledging it and acting on it were different challenges entirely. Sophie called on the 9th day. I almost didn't answer, but guilt won out over self-preservation. Elijah got the job, she said without preamble, at one of Vincent's import businesses. The pay is good, really good, and the payment plan is manageable. A pause. I owe you an apology. Sophie. No, let me finish. I was terrified and desperate, and I put you in an impossible position. Elijah's debt isn't your responsibility, or Vincent's problem beyond the business arrangement. I shouldn't have made you feel guilty for not fixing my husband's mistakes. Her voice cracked slightly. Are we okay? Relief flooded through me. Yeah, we're okay. Good. Because I need my best friend, even if I don't always deserve her. She exhaled shakily. For what it's worth, Elijah's grateful. Embarrassed, but grateful. The job is legitimate, completely above board. Vincent could have buried him, but he didn't. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet shop surrounded by roses and lilies, finally acknowledging what Grace had been trying to tell me. Vincent had found a solution that honored both his world's rules and my request for compassion. He'd tried to bridge the gap between us, and I'd been too caught up in wanting perfection to recognize the effort. That evening, I closed early and drove to Staten Island without calling ahead. Déjà vu from our fight mixing with nervous anticipation. What if 8 days of silence had convinced him I wasn't worth the complication? What if I'd waited too long? Tony answered the door, his expression neutral, but his eyes knowing. He's in his study. Go on up. Vincent sat behind his desk, papers spread before him, reading glasses perched on his nose. The sight of him, so familiar yet somehow new after our time apart, made my heart ache. He looked up when I entered, carefully schooled surprise crossing his features as he removed the glasses. Lily. He stood slowly, cautious. Is everything all right? I've been thinking, I said, staying near the door in case courage failed me. About us, about your world versus mine, about what I can and can't accept. His expression remained carefully neutral, but I saw tension in his shoulders. And what did you conclude? That I've been unfair, not about having concerns or struggles with how different our lives are, but about expecting you to abandon the rules of your world whenever they conflict with my ideals. I stepped further into the room. You tried to find middle ground with Elijah's situation. You gave him a real solution within your constraints. And instead of appreciating that, I made you feel inadequate. You weren't wrong to want more. Vincent moved around the desk but maintained distance. Your compassion is part of what I love about you. The casual use of love hit me squarely in the chest. We'd been dancing around the word for weeks, both too afraid to say it first. I love you too, I said, watching his careful composure fracture. Which is why I need to be honest about what I can handle. I don't want to know details of illegal activities. I won't ask about business that exists in gray areas, but I need you to be truthful with me about dangers that might affect me or Grace. Done. He closed the distance between us in 3 strides. Anything else? Yes. I need to know you're working towards something beyond just maintaining power, that there's a future where your world looks different, even if that takes years. I held his gaze. Can you promise me that? Vincent took my hands, his grip warm and solid. I've been working with attorneys for the past 2 months, setting up structures to legitimize more of the family businesses. Not overnight, but over the next few years I want to shift at least 60% of operations to completely legal enterprises. He paused. I started that before our fight, before Elijah's debt became an issue, because you made me question what legacy I actually want to leave. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I was doing it just to keep you. This needed to be my choice, my decision about the kind of man I want to be. His thumb traced circles on my palm. But I won't pretend you weren't the catalyst. You made me want to be better. I rose on my toes, kissing him with all the emotion I'd been holding back for over a week. He responded immediately, arms wrapping around me like he'd been starving for this contact. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. So, we're doing this, he murmured, building something real despite all the obstacles, at our own pace, with honest communication and patience for the fact that we're learning to bridge 2 different worlds. I pulled back to meet his eyes. It won't always be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Vincent tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch achingly gentle. But I'm willing to work for this, Lily. For us. 2 weeks later, Vincent asked me to dinner with his extended family. The invitation carried weight I understood implicitly. Meeting his family wasn't casual. It was a statement of serious intent in his world. Grace came with me for moral support, both of us nervous as Tony drove us to the mansion. The place looked even more impressive, lit up for evening entertaining. Windows glowing warmly against the darkening sky. Inside, at least 20 people mingled in the formal dining room. Vincent appeared immediately, his hand finding the small of my back in a possessive gesture that somehow felt reassuring rather than controlling. Everyone, he said, voice cutting through the conversation with effortless authority. This is Lily Morgan and her sister Grace. The introductions blurred together. Cousins, uncles, a few trusted associates who were practically family. Most were polite, curious, welcoming even. But I caught calculating looks from some, assessment in their gazes that made me hyper-aware of my simple dress and obvious outsider status. Dinner was elaborate, multiple courses served by efficient staff. I sat beside Vincent, Grace on my other side providing silent support as conversation flowed in Italian and English. Vincent translated when needed, his hand occasionally finding mine beneath the table. Halfway through the main course, an older cousin across the table, Carlo, leaned back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. So Vincent, quite a departure from your usual type, his gaze fixed on my face, specifically on my scar. Must have taken courage to choose someone so marked. Admirable, really. The room fell silent. Grace's hand found my knee under the table, squeezing hard. I felt heat flood my face, shame and anger mixing into something toxic. Vincent set down his fork with deliberate care. When he spoke, His voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely deadly. "Carlo, apologize to Lily. Now." Carlo laughed nervously. "Vincent, I don't care what you were just doing." Vincent stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You insulted my guest. More than that, you insulted someone who means everything to me. So you will apologize sincerely, and then you will leave my home. You can't be serious." Carlo looked around for support, finding none. "We're family. Not tonight. We're not. Apologize." The authority in Vincent's voice left no room for argument. Carlo stood awkwardly, looking at me with something between resentment and fear. "I apologize, Miss Morgan. My comment was inappropriate." "Accepted," I managed, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Now leave." Vincent didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Carlo left quickly, the door closing behind him with finality. Vincent remained standing, scanning the remaining guests with that same quiet intensity. Let me be absolutely clear. Lily is not a guest in this house. She is family now, which means disrespect toward her is disrespect toward me, and will be treated accordingly. He sat back down, picking up his fork like nothing had happened. "Understood?" Murmured agreements rippled around the table. Conversation resumed cautiously, but the dynamic had shifted. I wasn't just Vincent's girlfriend anymore. I was someone he'd defend publicly, forcefully, at the cost of family relationships. Later, after dinner dissolved into smaller conversations, and Grace was deep in discussion with Tony about criminal psychology, Vincent found me on the terrace. The same terrace where he'd played piano for me months ago. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly. "Throw out your cousin for me." "Yes, I did." Vincent leaned against the railing beside me. "Carlo needed to understand boundaries. Everyone in there needed to see that you're not someone they can dismiss or disrespect by defending the scarred girl." The bitterness in my voice surprised me. Vincent turned, cupping my face in his hands with heartbreaking gentleness. "By defending the woman I love, who happens to have a scar that proves she survived something that would have broken most people. There's a difference. How do you do that?" I asked, tears threatening. "How do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" "Because I've been watching you since the moment I saw you at that wedding. Every tear, every time you turned away, every moment of strength you showed when you thought no one noticed." His thumb brushed across my scar. "I've always seen you, Lily. All of you." The tears fell then. Happy ones this time. Vincent held me until they subsided, his embrace solid and safe. "I have something for you," he said eventually, pulling a small box from his pocket. "It's not what you think. Not yet. We both know it's too soon for that." Inside the box lay a silver key on a delicate chain. "To the mansion. Your own key, not borrowed." Vincent lifted it carefully. "You have a room here. Space that's yours if you want it. No pressure about moving in or changing your life. Just knowing that you always have a place here. With me. Whenever you want it." I turned so he could fasten the chain around my neck, the key settling against my heart. It felt significant, weighty with meaning that transcended the physical object. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. For being patient with my struggles. For finding ways to bridge our worlds even when it's difficult." Vincent turned me to face him, his expression tender. "You're worth every difficulty, Lily Morgan. Every compromise, every hard conversation, every moment of uncertainty. You're worth all of it." I kissed him there on the terrace, under stars barely visible through city lights, sealing a promise neither of us had spoken, but both understood. This wouldn't always be easy. Our different worlds would create friction and challenges. But together, we were strong enough to navigate whatever came. 6 months later, I stood in the expanded location of Petals and Thorns, now twice the size with 2 employees and corporate contracts I'd only dreamed about. Vincent's investment had been strictly legal, thoroughly documented, making me a business owner in truth rather than just name. Grace thrived at NYU, her internship at a law firm with Castellano connections teaching her nuances her textbooks couldn't. She'd found her calling in criminal justice, understanding both sides in ways her professors found remarkable. Sophie and I had rebuilt our friendship on more honest foundations. Elijah worked diligently at his legitimate job, paying down his debt and attending therapy for his gambling problem. Their marriage was stronger for facing the crisis head-on. Tonight, Vincent and I attended a charity gala in Manhattan, one of the legitimate business events he'd started prioritizing. I wore a dress that cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing. My hair swept up to showcase rather than hide my scar. For the first time in my adult life, I felt beautiful, not despite the mark on my face, but including it as part of my story. On the dance floor, Vincent held me close as we swayed to music played by a live orchestra. "Happy?" he asked softly, terrifyingly so. I smiled up at him. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Things will go wrong. That's life. His hand pressed against my lower back, steadying me. But we'll handle them together. A tear escaped, sliding down my cheek. Vincent caught it with his thumb, that same gesture he'd made countless times since that first night on a hotel terrace. "Happy tears," I clarified. "I cry when I'm overwhelmed by good things too." "I know." His smile was soft, private, meant only for me. "I've been watching you long enough to know all your tears. And I'll be here to see every single one that comes, whether they're sad or happy or something in between." Around us, the gala continued. Hundreds of people in their finest clothes making connections and conducting business. But in our small space on the dance floor, the world narrowed to just us. Vincent Castellano, who'd seen me hiding at a wedding and decided I was worth pursuing. And me, Lily Morgan, who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be fully seen. We danced until the music slowed, until other couples joined us, until the moment stretched into memory. And through it all, Vincent never looked away, his gaze holding mine with the same intensity that had first caught my attention months ago. He wasn't watching from a distance anymore. He was exactly where he'd always wanted to be, right beside me, present for every tear, every smile, every moment of a life we were building together despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. Sometimes love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone willing to grow, to change, to bridge impossible distances, because what waited on the other side was worth every struggle. And as Vincent pulled me closer, his lips finding mine in a kiss that tasted like promise and forever, I knew without doubt that we'd found exactly that.